Hey there, Dear Tech fam, and welcome back to another episode of the Dear Tech Podcast. So, quick question. What happened to Web3? 1 minute, it's the future of everything. Next minute, everyone moved on to ChatGPT. But here's the thing. People who actually understood what blockchain could actually do, they never left. My guest today, Harrie Bickle, she's the documentation lead at NodeOps, and she's been translating impossible blockchain jargon into plain English since 2017. And her path here was wild. She was a biologist turned into a teacher in South Africa, turned into Upwork freelancer, and now she's a Web3 documentation specialist. And she's helping build something that might actually deliver on Web3's original promise, making decentralized technology usable for normal humans. And we talk about, everything. We talk about the hype crashing out. And, she has this thing that she mentions that you're either here for the computer or here for the casino. And we talk about what that means, and it's actually quite interesting. And there's some opportunities there. And now, NodeOps is building cloud infrastructure that doesn't require a computer science degree, right? And then we get into some, uncomfortable things that are going on in today's market. Like, why does Coinbase want your wallet address when you apply for a job? Or why does Google block non-custodial wallets? And whether the Web3 privacy promise, like, was that ever real? Is that possible in today's day and age? We get into all of it, and Harrie's perspective is refreshing and honest, and there's no hype, there's no that crypto get rich quick jargon, none of that. And it's just a clear-eyed look at what's actually being built when everyone else stopped looking. And it was a wonderful conversation. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let's jump into it. Alrighty, Harrie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Shubho. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna jump in, just getting into, so I'm gonna get into more deeper about like Web3 in general, just because I feel like there was a big high in the cycle in Web3, and then there was a little bit of a lull. So we'll get there, but I do want to start with talking about, what good documentation actually means in Web3 now, because I understand, and especially because I've been around the tech world, that documentation is everything, because if people don't know how to use the tool, what's the point? But specifically in Web3, if you can get into what that actually means, we'll start right there.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the project I'm with at the moment, NodeOps, isn't your typical Web3 project because it's accessible through an app. So you're actually looking at really traditional Web2 style support where you've got screenshots to go. These are the buttons you press, Obviously, as you say, it's really important in terms of people landing and understanding what the product's about. So your docs are always part of your marketing. I don't think anyone would touch a project that hasn't got well thought out, well-defined docs that actually explain what the product does. But strangely, for this product, because people are literally entering through an app and the premise of the product is to abstract away all those technical difficulties, you can literally run a blockchain node by pressing a few buttons in app. So it isn't really your typical Web3 project. I'd agree with you that it's vital in terms of developer accessibility. So I've also helped write the docs for Infura. So if you're doing RPC calls to Ethereum or Base or Linnea, and you're a developer using those RPC endpoints, then you're looking for very traditional, essentially API documentation, and that has to be thorough, and you've really got to make sure that end users know what they're doing. So it's interesting. Web3 doesn't often support a non-technical audience, and finally we're getting there, which could mean we're at that promise stage, which we had more than a decade ago, which is that Web3 can change so much and simplify experiences so well. And I suspect that because I'm literally sitting on what's kind of half of my docs are essentially just a help center, that it's evidence that we're getting there. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to get into, because I think forever, right, traditionally Web3 products are for technical people. Like for the most part, you have to be, right, unless you're quote unquote, selling an NFT, or if you have Bitcoin or stuff like that. But now with NodeOps, because I went to your website, I went to what y'all are doing. Essentially, it's for the common person. It's for people that aren't as technical, right, or as technical in that world, which I think is very, very interesting. But if you could just, in terms of, documentation in general, like, what's your process? Because were you technical before coming on board, are you fairly technical? Because your job is to bridge the gap, right? That's
Indeed.
what you do.
Yeah.
So what's that process like?
So my take is that you're serving every single kind of user. Somebody comes to your docs, you're serving this unknown being. So you have to, in your mind, you have to think about who's landed and why they landed. So every docs page must essentially say, who is here and how can I help them? And more essentially, probably, how can I help them get out of this page because they're in the wrong place? So that's why the gold standard of like having a TLDR is just so important. So you'll find most of my docs pages have that up top. So you can literally orientate and say, like, I've got to think, especially when I'm thinking most people are here to use the app, like, do you need to be here on this page, or are you just confused about which app you need to use? So it's literally TLDR, this app will help you, and then whichever function the user might have landed on this page to perform. And then the next level, of course, is you've got the user who turned up on that page because they think they're in the right place, but they needed to know a little bit more before they were going to commit and actually get on and perhaps take on the app and perform that function. So you've got to have your explainer about what exactly the function is, what you might need. So you've got the typical setup of a prerequisite. So if you go to like the README of my repo, there's like a really standard template of that. So you're looking at a TLDR, you're looking at a prerequisite block, you're looking at an overview block. So it's all very simple stuff that you'd be used to seeing in the tech world. And also that what I have at the bottom is I also assume that I might have the reader. I doubt more than 0.1% of my users who land on my docs are ever the reader. But you could have that person who went from TLDR to the overview, that they went through the prerequisites, they understood what the page is for, but they're still not there for that. So I also have a what next block right there at the bottom to lead them out. Like if you were patient enough to go through the whole lot and you're still in the wrong place, where perhaps might you have wanted to be? So for me, it's all about respecting time. Like the most important thing with docs is nobody wants to sit around, apart from maybe the reader, which I don't know if they even exist. What like they're there to achieve whatever function they landed to do in the fastest possible time. And that's really what I believe I'm there to serve. But to answer your other question, like I'm not exactly technical. And my background is as a scientist. I started off as a biologist. I ended up, I'm so old. I'm so old that I am, apparently somebody gave me a birthday card that told me the year of the birth and things that happened. Shire, it was shocking. I'm as old as email. And my first proper job was in the .com boom. So I dabbled with academia, realized it wasn't for me. But because I had like database management skills as a biologist, you do statistics, you do interesting things with creatures that never signed up for it. And then you have a load of data that you have to analyze. So as a biologist, I had fairly mediocre, but okay, database skills. And based on that, ended up in technology in the .com boom in the 90s. So no, not a techie by training. No basic computer science degree under my belt. Just kind of an empathy for what it's like to not know anything and a willingness to make sure that people get to know what they need to know as fast as possible.
No, that's awesome. Wait, so what was your entry, like your first job into tech? Like where did you?
So I was database manager at a startup called freefund.com. And what we did is we digitized hundreds of books of scholarships so that students could come in, put in their details and see if they match to a scholarship. Now, the premise was quite smart in that what people realized really early on in the internet, and this has stuck with me forever because of this role, is you've got no reason to assume that anyone's telling the truth online. You've got absolutely no reason to believe anything anyone says unless they're got a reason to be honest. So very early on, people were aware of this. And the premise was, if you've got degree students, you're looking at the top 10% of the population. That was always the figure. I don't know. They've made degrees more accessible across the board now, and money to do them easier to get a hold of. It's still a very expensive endeavor, but
Yeah.
easier to get a hold of the money. And so if you're looking at the top 10% of the population and they could build a relationship with you at the stage of being students, and they could be forced to be honest with you at the stage of being students. So interestingly, that startup never figured out how to monetize that honest relationship. It failed in that premise. But that was essentially my task, was essentially digitizing books, which of course is done by OCR now. We had a room full of people playing data entry, literally, and also having to ask permissions. You had to contact the fund managers, as it were, to the sponsorships by phone to check that you were allowed to enter that data into a digital database instead of being on paper. It was quite an undertaking and a lot of effort put in to making that fly. Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the person on it, you said it too. It's like the idea is great, and I think it could have been like a crazy turnover. Like they could have figured it out. If you figured out just how to survive maybe like 5 years or like 10 years, it would have been insane, because all of those students are now probably, CEO of some company or building a company. But yeah, no, wow, that's phenomenal. And then, so what got you from there to documentation?
Oh, wow. So there's a long journey between that and documentation. So I did the .com boom for a while. I'm startup native. I went from startup to startup, one of which was successful. And what success looked like is the company was sold and we all lost our jobs. So I've got a fairly like sort of chilled out view on the world of what success can mean as a startup. Like if you fail, you can end up with the whole team like moving on. Yeah. And if you succeed, it can actually be the same outcome. So I got to see that product. It was one of the very early, crikey, to think these things didn't exist. It was one of the earliest CV and role matching HR systems. And it was it successfully sold to like the likes of, customers such as Nestle and other big corporates came in, and it was sold to the Manchester Guardian. So like I did bob around for a few years, and then I was in London doing this, and then we hit a recession, and I was like, I don't want to be in London for a recession. So I went back to you have to sit down, you have to rethink. When I think all the time, you have to sit down and you rethink, and you have to reconsider, what are your dreams and desires? What are you pointed at? Because every so often you need a reset. The global economy is never going to be some stable system. There's always cycles. There's always waves. As you said, Web3 had a peak and then a trough. Like, this is just normal. This is part of the global economy. So what I did as my reset is I said, one of the reasons I wanted to be a scientist was to travel around the world. I wanted to be able to see the world and work. I'm a terrible tourist. I'm very bad at sitting around in cafes and staring at buildings, or like, I need to be embedding deeply in whatever I'm in. And science did that for me in that I worked with locals. I was involved in the very nature of the very trees and plants and animals, the part of the fabric of a place. And so that was sort of part of what I wanted. I didn't just want to travel and see the world. I have to travel and somehow connect and embed, because otherwise I feel like I'm purely an observer. And so I figured out in this .com crash that the sensible thing to do was to not be in London for a recession. And I trained as a teacher and went back to my dream of traveling. And whilst training as a teacher, I actually ended up meeting a South African in London. And so instead of traveling the world to teach, I went to one location and ended up teaching in Cape Town in South Africa for very many years, I think 8 years. And that is when I then had to reassess. And the thing that pushed me there was not a recession, but motherhood. And you might think teaching is a fantastic career to have as a parent, because, you've got holidays together. It's a shocking career. to have as a parent, because you have hundreds of children as a teacher. You're responsible for so many kids, and you spend a lot of time with them. And there's a lot of effort, a lot of evening effort, a lot of weekends effort. And that means you don't have that time with your child. So I needed to really quickly pivot and make a change. For one, the way the salary is terrible, especially in Africa. Teaching salaries are not amazing in most parts of the world. I was pointed at Canada is because it's one of the places that pays teachers high salaries and gives them a lot of agency. But then, having met this South African and moving with him back to South Africa, I ended up in not one of the regions of the world that respects teachers and pays them high salaries. And so there was the salary issue, the time issue, and I pivoted. I pivoted kind of back to my roots in a way, in two ways. I went back to the science side in terms of I essentially offered statistical services. So I did a lot of editing of reports. I hired a statistician, and together we redid many reports that had been done badly. And I also started this track, which was a kind of technical writing, anything tech-related track on Upwork. I literally just set myself up a profile, set a rate, and went to go fish on Upwork. So I had these two tracks. I had this in real life track in Cape Town, where I became a vendor for both universities that were in town, had some excellent projects helping out on the statistics side. And then I had this other track, which was basically saying yes to anything on Upwork. And that is actually what launched this career that we're talking about now, where I became a technical writer and abused the meaning of the term to absolutely every possible extreme, from writing ridiculous 200-word items advertising VPNs through to documenting somebody's API, like literally just the full spectrum of what you could use technical writing to mean. So I think whenever you talk to technical writers, you're going to find that the journey was twisty and unusual. There's very few people who go to college and study and come out the other side, a technical writer, and then stay in that field. I think when you find technical writers, you're probably going to find people like me who have taken unusual twists and turns in their journey.
Yeah. Well, so from Upwork, was it like you were like it was essentially your own business, right? So you were going out, and so what was your, and this is just for my curiosity, how were you like attracting clients? Were you literally just having it up and people were reaching out to you, or did you have to like go out there and like try to attract clients?
Yeah, so I don't know if my timing was amazing, but I found it ridiculously easy to find work on Upwork. Yeah. And I've spoken to people since. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, I want to do what you do, Harrie. Like, I've given a kind of how to get started in Upwork talk, one-on-one, 2 rooms, 2 groups. Like, people have approached me and gone, I want to do what you're doing. I want the freedom of remote work, taking on gigs as you need them. Like, this looks great. And I have not got a single success story. I haven't got a single person that followed that path and took my advice and made a go of it. So I don't know if it was purely my timing or my absolute determination and stubbornness that if I say yes, I'm going to do this gig is going to come good. Like, the amazing thing about Upwork is I always insisted, I very rarely took fixed rate contracts because I'm very uncomfortable with quoting. And this is a place that business owners foul up their own business so easily. So I've got friends who are plumbers, for example. So my friend Jamie, who's a plumber, goes, Harrie, hardest part about my job is quoting. It's so difficult. Builders get it wrong all the time. Service industries, like agencies quoting to write, to market, to as in do marketing, it's so very difficult to hit that nail on the head. And the amazing thing about the Upwork model is you'll find clients who will say, sure, I'll pay your hourly rate. Let's just get this done. We don't know how long this is going to take. So one of the tricks I used to do that's probably made me come out looking golden is if I felt I wasn't being effective, I'd just turn the clock off. Like, why am I going to get paid if I've suddenly become ineffective? So I had a nice high rate, but unbeknownst to any of my clients, if I needed to go and do DYOR, just-in-time knowledge, I figured a skill had got so rusty that I wasn't in the zone, I wasn't in the flow. I would turn that clock off. I'd be working on that project and I'd turn it back on once I was golden again. So I think I managed to behave like the swan. I always managed to look good whilst pedaling hard underneath. And that just built me a beautiful reputation. I was on like 100% job success score, which is their very bizarre way of saying, you're bringing us in loads of money and we love having you on our platform. You know, you get reviewed by clients. It's an absolutely wonderful platform. I'm so grateful that they set it up. I'm so grateful for the opportunities it made, because I was in an African country. There is no way that anyone could really have afforded to pay me the hourly rate that I needed to be able to make a change to my career in the local economy. The local economy couldn't support us there. And so like so many people, like from the Filipino statistician that I employed on Upwork, you know, so not only was I offering services on Upwork, I was hiring people on Upwork. I had a VA hired from Upwork. I had my statistician hired from Upwork, occasionally writers if I was overwhelmed. So my hustle of my local agency, writing reports, getting the statistics firmed up or redone because they were wrong, all of that was also through talent that I found on Upwork. So it was absolutely fundamental to me making that change from teaching to back into tech.
Yeah, that's epic. I've used Upwork before too, and I think so. One thing that when you're starting using either a VA or Upwork, like one thing they say is like be like, hey, work on this for X amount of hours this week, because some people aren't as wonderful as you are, and they'll just keep going when they've hit a dead end, and it's not productive. But you doing that, definitely, yeah, your reputation is probably through the roof because you're like, oh, I'm only billing you for whatever 6 hours, and they look at this and they're like, this definitely took longer than 6 hours to do. And it's really good way to have repeat business or have a great reputation. That's amazing. And your journey is definitely very interesting. So, moving around, changing industries, and then, going via Upwork. How did the opportunity at NodeOps get to you?
Well, that wasn't through Upwork, but I definitely wouldn't have ended up in Web3 if it wasn't for Upwork. So I'd done, I think, one white paper, editing a white paper, and the team that I edited the white paper, so they didn't know, unbeknownst to them. So they were contracted to write it, and then the guy found me on Upwork and contracted me to edit it. But that team loved my work so much, what I did to the paper they'd written, that they found me and got me to start writing white papers for them, because that's essentially was one of the offerings they had. And evidently whoever had written it hadn't written it to the level that it didn't need editing. That's why I was brought in. So they loved that so much that they found me. And then there I was now writing white papers for Web3. And because of then that record, because as soon as you've got that experience, other people can find you for that related experience. That's when StarkWare popped up and came and offered me a editorial role. So then I got deep into Web3, and that StarkWare team was just incredible. I think, as far as I know, there were no other freelancers. They're in office. You have to be sitting your ass in Israel if you're going to be working with the StarkWare team. So just even that opportunity, to be brought in. And they really gave me hope as well. Both founders had a meet with me before I started working for them and aligned me to the product, gave me really good, like idiot level, come in at level 0, come and understand what we're doing. And this is what we expect from you. And this is what we're hoping you can do for us. Like that, they are a rare example of the set. And it was a really amazing setup. So I had just amazing fun over the next year and a half, 2 years. just diving into so many different aspects of what they were up to. And once you've got like a name like StarkWare on your portfolio, then just others. So that is, in essence, the answer to the question. So I believe StarkWare is essentially the beginning, and NodeOps is a direct result of the reputation I managed to build in the Web3 ecosystem. And it's because of the chance those guys gave me all those years back.
So so they were in office. You were remote. Were you still in South Africa at the time, or
Yeah.
Where are you now?
I'm now in Edinburgh, but for
Okay.
StarkWare, I worked for them in some very strange places. So yeah, so in Cape Town, but on the way, so before we returned to the UK, went via Mauritius. So I was there. I remember editing the StarkWare docs at the top of a mountain. I went and helped out this amazing group who are rehabilitating the forest in Mauritius because it's so. See, I'm still a biologist at heart. You see, I've still got this desire to fix the ecosystems around me. And so they do some amazing work with the pink pigeon, which is almost gone the way of the dodo, but not quite. And they're reforesting. So I would be out there and like for 2 hours a day, I would do like weeding for them. And for the other hours, until I got my lift back down, I'd be there like editing StarkWare docs, like trying to get the StarkNet docs up to date, being bitten by mosquitoes. And so, yeah, I've worked remote for StarkWare from some strange locations.
You weren't kidding that you can't just have a vacation. Like you have to be
No.
doing something.
Gotta get in there. And I wonder if that's what made me become like a tech writer. Because of course, as a tech writer, you're by definition the dumbest person in the room. You're trying to use somebody's tech and explain how to use it as the least capable person. You're not the developer. You're not the architect, not the system designer. You're not the business analyst that understands it, the depth of what we're trying to do, what the market is like, what the customers desire. You literally come in cold. And I wonder if that is actually kind of like a very similar sort of desire set of like, let me add it. I want to try it. I want to test it out. I want in there, even though I don't have any of the skills necessary to build such a system,
But I think that's what makes, like, I think if it's overly if you're too technical, then the translation is missed. Like you don't know how to translate it properly. Cause again, when you're looking, I'd say like when I was trying to get into understanding Web3 in the past, my eyes would glaze over because there's a barrier to entry of what you need to know to be able to do things, right?
Yeah.
Like when you set up your first crypto wallet, you don't know what you're doing. You're just reading the instructions and pressing buttons and hoping that it works out. But to actually understand it, there's this barrier to entry that most of us don't have. So it's really cool. So jumping back to NodeOps, because I think if you could give the bigger picture of what NodeOps is building, because when I look at it, I literally was like, this is what we've been looking for. Because the reason that I think the quote unquote, like the I don't want to say the fall, because that's not the right way to put it, but the slowdown of the Web3 world is the fact that the hype was there because we're like, oh, we're all going to get rich. But when the people try to actually use it or actually understand it, most of us can't, or most of us aren't willing to put that time in, right? And with NodeOps, I think that barrier has been brought down a little bit where we can be like, oh, like I can actually use this now. So if you could give us the bigger picture of what NodeOps is building, that'd be a great place.
Sure, I'll do that. But then to answer, just to sidestep first,
Sure.
when you were saying like when we looked at Web3 first and everyone's like, we're all going to get rich. So I heard an interesting way of putting it recently that I bonded with very deeply. And somebody said, you're either there for the computer or you're there for the casino. And now I know where I am there with bells on. I am not a gambler at heart. I'm not there for the casino. You tell me I'm going to get rich quick, I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Go talk to someone else about that because I'm not going to believe you. So I wasn't one of the ones that joined in because I might get rich quick. I joined in because I was fascinated by the computer, this large, slow, unstoppable computer, and everything it can solve for is what fascinates me. So back to NodeOps. So interestingly, unlike many other projects and protocols, you can come to NodeOps because you're interested in the computer. You could come to NodeOps because you're interested in the casino. So it actually serves every part of that spectrum. So let's start with where I am in there, which is the computer. So what NodeOps is doing is offering the world a decentralized compute marketplace. So we have the hyperscalers. You can go to Azure, AWS, GCP. There's a lot of the smaller companies that actually many of the startups go to because they don't want to pay the fees that you're going to pay at the big three. And they certainly don't want the lock-in that you've got to suck up if you want the lower fees with the big three hyperscalers. So I've worked for many projects that are using companies that are based on server rooms in Ukraine, for example. So if you want to go cheaper, there are cheaper alternatives. But what NodeOps is doing is offering a DePIN compute marketplace. So what that means is there's no one supplier. You yourself can bring a machine of the right spec, and as long as you promise not to run any workloads on it, you can't just bring me your laptop and add it to the network and be like, there you go, I'll watch Netflix on it while you guys get on with running some workloads. No, that's not allowed. No other workloads must be run, so it must be a dedicated machine. But given that, if you're sitting on a couple of old servers or a decent old laptop that's up to spec, say, you can add it to this network. And so as a provider, you're going to earn a share of the fees that are paid to run the compute on that machine. So that's the compute side of things, part of the compute side of things. Now, the interesting thing is, I don't know how techie you are or your audience will be, but usually when you take on a virtual machine, you get handed the SSH key. So you literally can go and talk at the shell level of the machine, and you can set that machine up with operating systems or worry about what kind of networking it should have, whether you want it to part of a virtual network. Like, there's a lot you can then do when you've got access to bare metal and you link up bare metal to bare metal. But that's not the architectural approach that the NodeOps team has taken. What they're doing is essentially, it's almost like DevOps as a service. They'll run a template as a containerized workload on that machine for you, but you don't have access to the machine itself. You set up how you want to run that workload, and they run it for you. And if there's any issue with that container, if it goes down, you get all the DevOps support if they spin that container up somewhere else. So the idea of the machine is abstracted away completely. You literally just running workloads, and again, through clicks in an app. So instead of saying to yourself, I need to set up the machine, now I need to worry about the operating system, you're literally dealing with templates that you deploy. Now, this is the second part of the supply side. So we've got the supply side of maybe you have a spare machine and you add it to the network. Now, the second part is, how do people run these workloads? So this is where we're trying to build up a relationship with the developer audience who are interested in earning by developing templates that can be run. So obviously the NodeOps team already have some of these templates. I don't know if you know, the original product is Node as a service, which means you can go, say, run an Ether node and assign a checker license to that node and start earning rewards from your checker license on an Ether node. So if you didn't want to go through all the hassle and technical overhead of setting a node up yourself, you just come along to the console app, and at a few clicks, you've got a node that's running that you can assign your license to. But if you think about what the DevOps team have done on the back end, they've just got a template that every time somebody wants to run an Ether node, that same container is spun up with the same resource allocation. It's going to need a minimum of this much CPU. It's going to need to have access to the internet this way. It's all set up and defined, and they just run that again and again and again. And that's what they made a successful business from month one. So this templatized infrastructure is the way our dev team actually think about the world. And what they're doing is they're bringing that opportunity to everybody. So you as a developer could come up with, I don't know, let's say you've come up with a brilliant alternative to WordPress, and you've got a series of plugins, and you've got the base website that's going to start you up, and you're going to have an easy way for people to put in their images and their blogs, and you've got everything abstracted away and done into a nice container, and you shove that on the marketplace and go, I wonder if people are interested in this. Well, as the template creator, you earn 20% of that workload fee. Every time that template is deployed and run, you've got the person providing the computers earning because somebody's running a workload. You've got the developer who provided the template is earning because somebody is running that workload. So you've got this robust marketplace, which is supporting the smaller scale to bigger scale. You could be a server farm in the Ukraine and say, I'm going to put all of my servers on this marketplace. Or you could be a garage setup. Garage. How do you say it over on your side of the pond?
Garage
setup. And just have a few servers. Or you could be mega, you could be substantially sized. And we're addressing interesting challenges at the moment because many people are trying to step away from the hyperscalers because it's so expensive to have multi-region setups, redundancy. Yes, GCP have server farms everywhere, but you're going to pay a lot less if you're using one of the United States farms because that's where their cheapest zones are. So if you really wanted to say, I need to be spread across 6 continents, it is actually quite an expensive thing to achieve. So we're looking now at how do we allow people and how do we confirm where in the world the suppliers are for the compute supply. So you could actually go and set up a fail-safe redundancy-based system across the globe. So we've got this exciting development going on this supply side. And then on demand side, we've got this interesting, like I said, people who are kind of like there for the casino. So you've got these Web3 audience who are kind of with the zeitgeist. They get that this is an interesting proposition and they want in. So one of the things you can do if you're interested in kind of like taking a shot at it is one of the things you can do is say, well, I will rent one of those machines from the network and I'll take over that machine. I'll almost squat that machine. And because I've paid to take over that machine, I get a share of the workload that's run on that machine. So we call that farming the compute. You can literally go swat a machine. So it's creating a kind of a Web3 demand side where people who are interested, they don't want to get their hands dirty and actually hold machines and go out and buy old servers that are going to earn, but they want to be in it and they want to see what the rewards are like and get some of these ecosystem rewards. So that's kind of like what I in my divided, like you're there to the computer or there to the casino. There's this side of the spectrum which is attracting people in, and you've got even more wonderful Web3 meta going on there. We've got our own NFT, and if you own one of these NFTs, it's an Uno NFT, you essentially own a license to be a verifier on the network. So one of the important things, if somebody is bringing the machine to this DePIN, this decentralized infrastructure, well, that machine's got to be online. It's got to be ready and responsive. So the node orchestrators are part of the verification layer that say, is this machine active? Is it running workloads? Is it responsive? And if it isn't, obviously that supplier needs to be penalized. And we need an observer, independent observer, to verify that this is true, that the machine is available or not available, and then slashing on can be implemented or rewards can be implemented. And that's the role of these NFT holders. So there's a lot of like the Web3 natives have their place, and it's essentially a Web2 business model of providing cloud and trying to attract attract a different kind of cloud marketplace user and essentially redefine how we consume cloud compute as opposed to the typical hyperscaler model. And I'm not against the hyperscalers. I mentioned the lock-in pain that people suffer. Well, one of the things you could do is say you over-resourced and you're sitting on a whole load of GCP that you said you signed up for because you like the price and you're not using it. Well, we've just created a marketplace where you can come and assign those machines that are not sitting idle.
Well, I feel like that's about to be a whole new business model for companies that because there's a lot. I remember a few companies in the past that I've worked at. I hear about we signed up for this, but right now we just slowed down a bunch. We're not going to be using probably like a fifth or a sixth of it, and it's like terabytes of space, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
it's like so that's going to be awesome. For my own curiosity, what's more lucrative, having your own, being the person who has the machine? Or being the person that takes over another machine, just so in case someone wants to start a new business.
Interesting. I don't have the data yet. We're very early in the day, so I'm not seeing the data. So what I would say is that farm is part of the bootstrapping phase. So anything that is using tokens that are generated to bootstrap is by definition not fundamentally a long-term model. So it's come and get it now, guys, because this could dry up. Obviously, if the system's robust enough. So the interesting thing is, so you take that workload fee. So I come along and I'm like, I need some cloud compute. I've chosen my template that I want to run, and I'm running this NAN instance or whatever it is that I've decided I need. Of that fee, 50% is immediately burned because, of course, we're talking Web3 protocol here. Yeah. So we're trying to control inflation within the protocol, and we're also trying to reward. So 50% of that is immediately burned. And I believe 20% of that goes to the compute provider. And no, 25% goes to the compute provider. And now you're left with the 25%. Now, I'd have to look this up on my docs, actually. But I believe it's something like a 10 and then 15% split. And 10% is for treasury. And 15%, I can't remember. So that treasury amount can then go back in for rewards, for incentivizing people to come and take part in the ecosystem and get their feet wet by doing something like farm compute. So it's not that it's a perpetual motion machine that will just run out. It's built into the protocol that there's a pot from every workload fee that can be used for incentivization to do further growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. For me right now, I'm keep going back to thinking of people, like you said, right, that are in the big three that aren't using all the space. I'm like, is this like this? Again, I said that this could be a new business model, but it's like I feel like a lot of people aren't thinking of it this way. And I'm not expecting this episode to like take the market by storm, but I feel like that's, at least for a few years, that's going to be very doable business model. Anyway, okay, so if I'm not mistaken, NodeOps started in 2023.
So 18 months old, I believe.
So it's very interesting because the hype, right, that we spoke about Web3 and about blockchain was in the early 2020, 2021. That's when it got like really, really big. So my question is, how are you all scaling right now? Because without the typical hype that was there prior, because you started in 23, that's right when people are like, ooh, ChatGPT, right? That's when the focus of the media kind of shifted a little bit more to LLMs. So talk about how you're scaling, without that extra press boost, because right now I'd say people that know, and so they're over here in it with Web3. A lot of people who I know that understand what's going on are still there, still very excited. Obviously, now Wall Street is all about the cryptocurrency, but I don't think they're looking beyond that, right? And I have a few other things in why that I'll ask about later. But in terms of how you're scaling currently, how has that affected you, and what are you doing in the scaling front?
So we've definitely responded to the shift in demand. So if you look at the first business model, it was purely Node as a service. So in a way, that is DevOps as a service, essentially what the cloud is too. But it was purely Node as a service based on Web3. So that means that somebody's bought that Node license, or there's a gaming protocol that's incentivizing users to run a data availability node. So they spin up a node and they'll earn rewards. So that meant that the revenue, which, I mean, it's always been revenue positive, but obviously the rates go up and down of how well that revenue model is doing. That meant that revenue model was tied to the swings and arrows of fortune of the Web3 world. So actually, it was fundamentally a business decision to say, we are going to expand this offering into, which is one of the fastest growing sectors there is, which is compute demand. So certainly it's part of a natural sort of business protection mechanism of saying, what is the most stable market? Where can we position ourselves? But given that, that console product's not gone away and it's still revenue positive because the demand is still there. It's just that it is tied to these fluctuations, as you say, as the narrative moves. But the amazing thing about our timing is, of course, the compute marketplace is growing and predicted to grow significantly over the next few years. And that is because of the AI demand. And of course, a marketplace that offers both CPU and GPU, which is what we're close to doing. Our CPU is there from our smaller suppliers, and our GPU is coming on board with dedicated suppliers coming in. So that's what AI needs. So we even have a tool set that's being built out. I don't know if you've seen, but one of the toolings what's in beta testing at the moment is an AI development terminal, which is essentially an IDE in the cloud with collaborative environment that you can share the endpoint with whoever you're working with. And that's linked directly to that compute. So you can get the compute you need on the fly whilst developing. And so there's a definite kind of repositioning that we've done that also aligns with the shifted narrative and the shifted demand, but whilst staying true to supporting up those Web3 users that have been with us since day one, because that service is still a fundamentally viable business. It's just that business it leads, of course, tied to the swings and roundabouts that everybody else in Web3 is tied to.
Well, no, but I think it's really it makes sense, right? Like that first business essentially was for it was for people who, well, I'll say at least initially was for people who weren't working with the whims of media or with the tide. You know, it was baseline. This is what we need. This is what we're doing. And then you'll have some extras, right? And generally what happens, at least from what I've seen, is the people that come in that are curious that start doing it, that sometimes will be a large enough layer that companies chase that chase the people that are chasing the shiny. And if you don't pivot at the right time, or not pivot, but you don't expand at the right time like y'all did, that's where the hiccups hurt the most, because you're like, oh, I just lost 40% of my customers or of my business. So that's really cool. And so you mentioned DePIN. So I'm not DePIN 2.0. Is that what you were mentioning before?
Okay, so there you're touching on the tokenomics. So what's interesting about DePIN? Okay, so this has been tried and there's some very successful models, but most of the models have proven to be quite risky tokenomic strategies. So we sat, and this was probably the most kind of thought out and pondered and debated and tested aspect of the DePIN business that we have issued so far, and this is the tokenomics. So if I give you like a very basic, wow, I haven't spoken about this for a while, so so if I give you a very basic idea of where it can go wrong. So what a project tends to do is it tends to emit tokens to be able to attract that supply side. So it could be that people are providing computers in like our model, but some of the successful, so if you take something like Helium, they actually buy devices that are the edge devices that are running the DePIN network. So the way you incentivize people to actually purchase a device or add a machine or whatever it is that this decentralized infrastructure is doing is by emitting tokens and handing them tokens. Now, the mistake some of these projects have made is that they set a schedule to say the tokens are going to emit at this steady rate. So what that immediately does is it says your token value is not tied to anything. It's purely a machine that's printing tokens and you hand the tokens out. So one of the things that the more successful projects have done, for example, Helium has had a DAO governance decision made. And what they've done is adjust that token emission rate. And they actually have now a decaying rate. So they're saying, we don't want an overinflated system where the issuance has gone too high. So we're going to have this trailing emission rate. But that's still a static rate. Okay, so this is DePIN 1.0, where you have this emissions, but what it does is it puts the whole system at risk of inflation. So what we've done is something different. But before we get onto that, you've got the other side of the coin, which is you also got your burn. So very often, based on the protocol activity, the protocols will burn some of those tokens. So you've got tokens being emitted. And of course, if you've got equal balance, then you've got a flat system. And if you get off balance in emissions going too high, you'll get inflation, and burn going too low, you'll get a deflationary system. And you want to be fairly, but you don't want to be off the charts inflation. You want, ideally, if you're a token holder, you're hoping for a slight deflationary system, because then what you're saying essentially is there's the potential for your token value to go up. So you're balancing these requirements. So what we believe we've done, which is fundamentally different, is offer this DePIN 2.0. And what this means is you've got dynamic mint and dynamic burn. So in the NodeOps protocol, tokens are only emitted when the supply side is active. So as people pay for workloads, that's creating demand, then tokens can be dynamically emitted. And furthermore, there's a cap. So say that demand suddenly goes up within one day and tokens are emitted, you could still go into an inflationary system, but there's a daily cap. So it actually says, okay, well, that's the limit. You've had your tokens for the day. So this is quite novel in itself. And the other thing we have is a dynamic burn. So as that supply side churns, that's causing that 50% burn every time the workload feed is paid, then 50% of that is burned. Now, there's another factor added in that most protocols miss out, is that this is all tied to USD value. You don't pay in the token, in a token value. You pay in the token to the value that is tied to USD. So what I'm saying is the workload that you pay for is valued in USD, but you can pay in the token. But that means that as the token price fluctuates, so it has to adjust. If the token price goes very high, then you would spend less of those for your USD value. If the token price drops, then you have to spend more of them to reach your USD value. And this is something that's often missing from most of these tokenomic models. So what happens is you can over-reward suppliers. Say your token price is going up, but you've got a fixed rate where you say, well, you bought your edge device and you're providing it to the network. Therefore, well done, you're going to get 10 tokens at the end of the day. Well, if the token value has gone up, you could actually be paying the supply side more than the value of the service they're providing to the network. So by linking this to the USD and assuring that there's this dynamic mint that is capped, that can't overinflate, and this dynamic burn, we believe we've offered a tokenomics model that is actually reactive to the wider ecosystem, as in the pricing, and to actual demand on the base layer of the protocol. And this is why it's a 2.0, because nobody's doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it makes it more sustainable, because I think, the whole problem ends up being is when it's in its own bubble, right? When you're working in a bubble where you don't look around and see, oh, how's the economy doing, or how's the dollar doing, and those things. And like you said, if you keep doing that, because I think the .com burst from the 90s is filled with companies that had these plans that didn't account for variables like that. I had a guest earlier speak about how there was an ad agency that would give you X amount of dollars for, I forget what it was, like for getting something mailed to your house. And they went to UPS and they went to the post office and bought a bunch of different the PO boxes and gamed the system and made a whole bunch of money at the expense of that company. It happened all the time in those days, and I think today you can see that there's definitely companies out there that haven't thought of these things, and they're either not around or the times are hurting. So that's really, really cool. And so the question that I've been itching to ask is because I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like the powers that be, not that they don't love Web3, but I think the whole thing about Web3 is that everything's public. You control your data. Everyone does their own thing. But I feel like, again, there are these companies out there that are built on other people's data, right? I don't think they'd be very excited about people controlling their own data to this degree. Do you think, do you think that's affected the Web3 cycle that we're talking about that came back down? Because I think all of a sudden, all these companies that are essentially only making money in Silicon Valley because of the fact that they control all this data, wouldn't be able to do that in a post Web3 world where, ideally, everyone controls their own data.
Interesting. There's a few things I'd unpack there. The ideal of Web3 is that we control our data. But the reality is those CK proofs are not protecting me everywhere I go. And instead, a lot of what I do is public on chain. So the privacy that we are promised is it's a pseudo anonymity. And as soon as I am identified linked to my wallet, then that anonymity just disappears all the way down. And you can see everything I've ever done. And even if it's, you can see everything I've ever done. And even in on-chain activity, what am I going to do? I'm going to move my funds to another wallet. Well, you can follow a data exhaust. Part of the core of what we're trying to achieve is a greater agency and say over what we can leak and what we present. And I believe that there's solutions that are getting there. We definitely have ID solutions that are coming that are absolutely awesome. We have privacy protocols that are coming that are absolutely awesome. And I do believe that it's an uncomfortable fit for some of these companies that rely on our data exhaust to understand us. I really don't yet feel that we're close enough to actually shake their business models. It's interesting because the other promise of Web3 was essentially that you could remove the need for the bank. And Google have just essentially killed that in their announcement this week, which is that non-custodial Web3 wallets will not be accepted in the App Store. Mm-hmm. They are forcing a level of KYC just to be able to do app purchases. Now, it gets very interesting, especially in an AI world, because essentially what they're trying to do is almost like a proof of humanity. Mm-hmm. So, these are difficult philosophical times because do you want AI agents to be able to do Google App Store purchases? I don't know. So we're at this intersection where a Web3 wallet, not only did it provide me with a level of personal freedom theoretically, it provides AI agents with a degree of personal freedom. And those walls are coming down, the barriers are coming down. And I think it was probably because of the cypherpunk roots that these core values have persisted and were core and have persisted in the narrative. But I think they were quite naive roots because even though the cryptography can give you all the privacy you might desire, your regulators may not ever allow you to use that cryptography in the way that it can be used. So there's always this tension between what is possible technically and what the regulators will allow. Now, you can always go out and go contrary to the regulation, but that then puts you in a certain category of person who might see certain consequences for their behaviors because you've crossed those regulatory boundaries. So the interesting thing is this promise of Web3 was massive
Yeah.
and still has that potential. But actually, where the war is that we might not realize we need to fight is it's a regulation war that we're now in, and Google's just very firmly stated where it sits on the side of non-custodial wallets. I think I might have wandered somewhat there from your original.
No, you're fine. Hey, no, because it hits the crux of it, because I think you're absolutely right that these, a lot of these companies, governments, whomever, anonymity isn't always a good thing, and we know that, right? Because you can, with anonymity, you can buy whatever you want, and sometimes it's their whole point is that if we make it fully anonymous, the bad people are going to get away with things, which makes sense. But I do think that, though that is the argument, that's not necessarily the motivation fully, because eventually at the end of the day, they're losing out on stuff when they're not seeing trends or whatever that they want to see. And I do think that there might be an appetite in the future. Right now, not so much, mostly because most people don't know that this battle's happening, in terms of people wanting the anonymity or wanting to be able to do their own thing, as opposed to the bigger companies that want to hold on to their control. Where there will be an actor, I don't know if it'll be a startup or if it'll be some rogue agent, but that'll create this place where we can be fully anonymous, do our own thing, and hopefully, I mean, I don't know, this is a whole other conversation in terms of safeguards and what they want to do to make sure everything works out. But it's going to happen at some point, beyond what's already been happening, where someone's going to stand up to the Googles, the Apples, and be like, we're going to, create a whole other ecosystem outside of what y'all are doing, and we're just going to make it mainstream. And then if that becomes big enough, that'll be the new normal, right? That's how all these things end up working. But yeah, no, I think I just think about how much I used to think about Web3 in like early 2021. And the reason I asked this question was more so that I was like, I haven't really thought about Web3 and blockchain in a long time, like me personally. And I was like, is that like propaganda? Like, I really went down this rabbit hole of like, did someone make me not think about it or make me forget about it? Because I really feel that way, where I was doing a lot of research into Web3. I was doing a lot of research into crypto, into NFTs, and I just stopped today. And I don't know if that's when OpenAI launched ChatGPT. I don't remember exactly when, but I was like, I feel like someone, there might be some sort of a ploy here from someone to make us forget.
I definitely remember the narrative shifting. So I haven't stopped thinking about it since 2017 when I first stepped in. Like, I've been living and breathing this stuff for several years now, and I still love it, and I still love the promise it has. I definitely agree the narrative has shifted, and that AI took over the narrative. So I think people suffer from shiny. So the next thing became shiny, and the trouble is, our entire media is built around moving to the next narrative, and it's like it doesn't have an attention span. I remember a Spanish student, a PhD I was working with, and he said to me, "It's so frustrating reading your newspapers." He's like, in Spain, when a topic comes up, it's there in our papers for weeks, and we run it down until the end. We know the outcome. He's like, over here, and he's talking about, we were in Northern England at the time, so he's talking about English newspapers. He's like, you see it and it's gone. So we've got this like sort of headwick kind of like attention economy. So the trouble with anything to do with blockchain is it is a large, slow computer, or, like that has huge potential for changing how we interact, how we manage information. But there was a lot of building to do. And did anyone have the attention economy that was going to sit and wait while devs got on with the task of building what they built? Like, I look at what the Ethereum Foundation have achieved, and I look at some of the forks that they've done. And the fact that a remote team that small can manage technical accomplishments that large so smoothly is just absolutely incredible. Like, the kind of work they do is just groundbreaking. and outstanding. And only a few people have stayed around to applaud them every step of the way. And once they've done what they need to do, and once the functionality is so much better, and we've solved for, you can lose your seed phrase, and that's the end of that. Like, once these very technical challenges that stop your auntie from using crypto are solved for, people will come back. But nobody was going to sit around and watch, apart from the likes of me, who's like, oh, let me try it, like, can I have a go? They're not going to sit around and watch somebody develop. Like, it's no fun. It's like watching paint dry. So there was all this promise and potential, and there still is all the promise and potential. But we've got to overcome some serious technological challenges, and we've got to fight those regulatory fights. So, I mean, what happened this year, is it still, in terms of the SEC's change in positioning on what's security and what's not? What's people not following it, but it's huge. But then let's go back to that, because that is huge. I went to an event recently that said there are more boomers now own Bitcoin and Ether than anyone else. And it's all because of ETFs. Like, what are boomers doing owning crypto? They didn't go and grab a wallet. They grabbed a financial advisor, and now they own crypto. Like, but it's bizarre to me. So, I mean, if you'd said in 2017, boomers are going to own crypto, I'd have been like, what are you on about? That's bizarre. But they abstracted away the wallet problems. They rely on enterprise grades, multi-sig, multi-party computation vaults that hold crypto, and then they own some financial vehicle to own that through. They abstracted away the whole problem that, like, no, they don't know how to look after a seed phrase,
Well, they're adding I think they're adding crypto to our 401ks. I think they're going to sign that for the United States for our 401ks to be able to hold, and that's going to change everything, right? Because that's every person with a corporate job gets a 401k from their company automatically into the crypto market now.
So it's happening, but it's a revolution that took a while to get to the stage where, where JP Morgan is there with bells on, and BlackRock now probably are managing more crypto than anyone else. Like, it until it became mainstream, but then in a way it lost its cypherpunk roots, because now it is mainstream. But is it back to watching paint dry? I don't think so. I think there's still really exciting things that you can do with Web3 that you can't do in any other way. So I'm still here with Elsa, because I still think it's great.
I think people that got it, like, what I'll say is, I think at the end of the day, understanding the impact of the things that are happening in Web3 prior to fairly recently took a bit more effort. And again, we said that the media kind of moved to the next thing that's shiny. If you understand Web3, it was never not shiny. It's just that it took a little bit more effort to understand the utility, a little bit more effort to understand why it's cool, why it matters, and again, not that much more, right? Read 2 more articles maybe. The difference is when you have ChatGPT in front of you and you ask it a question and it gives you 5 paragraphs, it's just so much, it takes no effort at all. And because again, with Web3, with any so far that's come out, any Web3 like crypto or NFT for the layman person, to understand the impact of what's going on, you have to read more than 1 article. And I think that's the barrier to entry that most people aren't willing to do, or weren't willing to do, which is unfortunate. It's sad because they are missing out. But now, and again, with the changes that are coming, and like you said, in the next few years, especially with now crypto being a part of essentially everyone's day-to-day life because of the ETFs and the 401ks, people are going to be forced to, this in the 401ks, people are going to be, who's in his 80s, who, reads about the next new company because he wants to add it to his portfolio. My my uncle and and he's going to be learning in the
Yeah.
401ks. People are going to be.
And I think possibly it's almost inevitable, right? So, because one of the things it solves for is the cost of transactions. And ain't no one going to pay more when they can pay less. Yeah. So there's a degree of inevitability that is just coming, because like there is no Web2 major corporation that is, if it's offered a cheaper way of doing things, it's just going to be like, no, we reject this on basic principles. No, it's going to be. What's interesting though is, given its roots, is everybody immediately gave up. So I can have a non-custodial wallet. I can manage my own seed phrase, and I can be in control of my funds. This was one of the premises, the early dreams. How do most people buy their first crypto?
Robinhood or
yeah, they immediately get a custodial wallet. It's the first thing everybody does. So it's a complete vertical that was born within one narrative and has immediately had to evolve and change and morph to fit what people actually do day to day.
Well, people don't even understand the difference most of the time, right? Like they don't. They like, no, in all honesty, like Coinbase, Kraken, all these things. People were like, oh, it's anonymous. I can do whatever. And then they're on Coinbase, and it's like, do you understand the difference, or do you understand the point, or do you understand what was going on? Because I remember this had to be in college, and this was when Bitcoin was no money. It was, and I remember this only because I was trying to buy a product, and it was from kind of a shady or a dodgy website, and I only know this because they were like, oh, you can pay for it in Bitcoin, and here's a website to mine it and buy it, and then you can pay us, right? And at that time, I almost did it just because it was a new thing to do, and I was young, so I was like, let me just do it. And I kick myself now because it was literally, Bitcoin must have been like $4 or $5, $10. Every time I think about it, I want to cry. The point is, at that time, it would have been non-custodial because there's no wallets, right? I have to do it myself, and people were doing it. There were pizza places that were accepting Bitcoin. Like, it was a whole thing for a while. And this is all like literally before Bitcoin got to 100, and people were doing it. And then as soon as someone made a custodial wallet, people stopped trying. They were like, nope, we're gonna, this is easier. We don't have to think about it. But they didn't understand what they traded. They didn't understand the difference, and people still don't get the difference. And that's the thing. Again, like I said, you have to read more than one article, and people aren't doing it. Or you have to read one article and people aren't doing it because the person on YouTube is just telling them, hey, like, and not now. Now, I mean, YouTube's a lot better with it. But back in the day, hey, there's a new thing. It's called Bitcoin. You buy it. You can buy it on Coinbase, and you can be fully anonymous when you buy things. And it's like, well, no, that's not exactly the way it works.
Yeah, and Coinbase, that's my word. So I got laid off just before Christmas, and I was like, oh man, like here we go again. It was a big round of layoffs from Consensus, and there I am sitting in November going, oh man, here we go. And I actually went ahead and applied for a job at Coinbase, and sat there going, do I press? This is so weird, because what they asked for was name, address, and Web3 wallet. I have never in my life put those 3 items into one form and press send.
That
and I
defeats
was
the
like,
purpose.
I was like, what? Like, what is this? And also, you've got to choose which Web3 wallet. I don't have one Web3 wallet. I'm there going, what are they looking for exactly? What do they want to see? The activity. Do they need to know you've bought an NFT? Are they interested whether you own Bitcoin or do they want to see whether you've got USDC? I was just like, what is the motivation for this? And then just that, because I came traded like back in the 90s, so it's like, but the fundamental thing is you do not know who anyone is online. Like, my privacy
Yeah.
It's so important. And I was just like, it was the hardest thing, just sitting there going, do I press send? Don't I press send? This is so weird right now. Whereas normal people every day just go and sign up for a Coinbase wallet without thinking about it. They're not in the frenzy I was of just going, is this what do I do now?
It's crazy because, wow, they really asked. That's, I mean,
They
if you,
asked that.
that's, I don't know. It's kind of, I didn't get goosebumps exactly, but I feel kind of weird. Anyway,
It is weird.
it's very
I
weird.
felt kind of dirty. It was
Yeah, yeah. Right.
it's so strange.
No, but it's a name. Give me your name and then give me your bank account number, or give me your social security number. Like, it's just like, and the thing is, you might not get the job, but they will have that information forever. And that's honestly, it's genius. Like, if we're being objective in terms of like for them, right? It's genius because now they're getting so much data of understanding who these people are forever.
Wow.
It's I mean, not in a good way, evil genius, fine.
No,
but it's genius.
And I saw a post on LinkedIn. I don't know if the numbers are true, but it said 1.5 million job applicants every year. So you're hoovering up an all right amount of data there.
You know what you need is you need to get a wallet that you do nothing with, and just.
No, but that's not going to get you. If they're interested, if they're literally like taking it to go, okay, you're applying for this like crypto related role. Do you have any experience in crypto? So you can't do you can't just spin up an empty wallet and like send them that, because then like, what's the motivation? I don't know.
You don't know, but you don't know if they're even
reach out, please, Coinbase HR, and tell us why.
Because in my mind, I think they just want to know that you're in the space. Okay, there's two perspectives to look at it. Because my background's recruiting. I just launched a recruiting company, so like I very much see that there's two different motivations for this. As a recruiter looking at the job, I don't care. Right? As a recruiter trying to hire for the company, in terms of like what your wallet's doing, I don't care, because I probably don't even know, right? Because my job is to find the right candidate. The company probably cares from a perspective of pulling data, but I don't think that'll affect what you're doing on the wallet. Will affect
the outcome of the recruitment process.
Yeah, because I don't see me as a recruiter being able to even get that data. I'll just see, oh, did they put a wallet in? They did. Okay, cool. Like, that's all I'm gonna see. And because very much so, like as a recruiter, even if you're a percentage more than 25% of recruiters, I don't know what that number is, aren't very technical. Whenever there's any of these technical recommendations, they have to either send it out back to the hiring team to be like, oh, can you read this code and make sure that they did this test well, or they have a third party doing it. So anyway, I digress. I think it's more so the company wants the data, and that's that. But it's still wild. Oh, man.
It is strange.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
None of my truly Web3 companies have ever answered me for such a thing.
Yep. I mean, and again, I think for Coinbase, it's that they've gotten so big, they're hiring people that are not in the know now, right? Where I think if you're a truly Web3 company, if you're a smaller company, if you're a startup, if you're close knit, because again, if you're one of 5,000, okay, like, you probably, if you're a lawyer, and you'll have a wallet, but you don't know better. If you're a HR person, or if you're, but when you're a tight knit team, and again, when you're especially when you're a startup, everyone needs to have a degree of understanding, right? Maybe they're not technical, but they have a degree of understanding to be relevant to the team in terms of what you're doing outside, whether it's client facing, whether so. They get away with it doing a big company because people don't know better. But with small teams, they know. They're like, if we ask this, no one's applying. No one that we care about, right? No one that's relevant is going to apply.
Who's going to apply?
And then we're going to get dragged on, on Reddit, right? And be like, can you believe what they just asked? Anyway, I think it's wild. All right, let's see. All right, before I move towards wrapping up, I wanted, one of the things it's something that you put in the form that I just want you to expand on is, clarity is a form of equity in Web3, and I think we've gone through a lot of examples of it, but just expand on that just a little bit in terms of, when you're, I would say, actually no, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna let you expand on it, and then we're gonna work towards wrap up.
Interesting. Were those my words? Clarity is a form of equity.
I believe it was in the form, or I pulled it from your LinkedIn. So I did my research. So again, so the audience
I
won't notice
like
till right
it.
now.
I don't know. I know she can attribute it to me. I kind of like
No,
it.
it has to be from you because it was from my research, and I know it had to have been something from either something you posted or something you wrote. Um, I'll send you the link and show you your own
Yes,
words.
I'd love to know where I've been philosophizing. So one of my bugbears, okay, is everybody goes DYOR. I think that is one of the most insulting terms to throw at a person. If I tell you that as a technical writer deeply embedded in product teams, I cannot always tell you whether a product is functional, then what the heck does DYOR mean for a normal person who's relying on the content that a company is presenting to the world?
Yeah,
So if I was to narrow the idea that clarity is a form of equity, I think one of the promises of Web3 is that we do have on-chain data. And the sooner a company gets its information on-chain and verifiable, the better. And I would be far more willing to trust them. So interestingly, one of the things StarkWare did early on is realize that with their zero-knowledge proofs, one of the things you could do as a big business is you could present to the world in a zero-knowledge format. You don't have to reveal the values, but you can present that you're in the black and not in the red. If you're a big bank, you could present that you haven't fractionalized your reserves past, say, 10%. Like, wouldn't that have been really useful information? Like, what, wouldn't it have been helpful pre-financial crisis to have daily audits of large financial institutions in zero knowledge proof format where they demonstrate the fractionalization of their reserves or that they are in fact in the black and not in the red? Like, I don't know about you, but my entire country's economy was nearly taken down by one bank failing and they had to rush in. And I now own a really bad value bank that is costing me a fortune. Like it's like that constant socialize the costs, privatize the gains.
yeah,
But why? Like why did I have to go, like rush out? Not me personally, but
yeah,
I
yeah.
pay that, like
Yeah.
about half of what I earn goes to keep this beautiful country together, So like we have the technology that can prevent huge incidents that could take down entire economies. Web3 has provided this, especially in partnership with ZK Proofs. It's here. It's been around for a decade now. So there is an equity that could be in play that is not. And Web3 and ZK Proofs promise that and offer that and are right here, right now, available. So I do believe there's a level of equity that myself as a citizen deserves that I'm not yet seeing, and the technology already offers it. So it's all about that mindset shift, that regulation shift to enforce that we use such technologies and make sure that people know what's going on. So yeah, there is something about making sure the data is available to everybody who needs it that I kind of have a passion for that I don't believe is being met yet.
Yeah. No, I think we will be. We're almost there. Well, I shouldn't say almost, but it's getting there because honestly, people are perking their ears up, and I really think that this shift into getting these, at least the start is getting crypto into, again, we talked ETFs and 401ks. That's the first part, because right now the problem is enough people don't care, and that's it. And as soon as that enough people care just a little bit, doesn't have to be a lot, just a little bit, everything will switch out. Okay, so tell me something. I'll say this industry is you said it, it's slow and fast at the same time. Slow in the sense that people are building and it's taking time. Fast in the sense that you're part of a startup team, and that's a very dynamic place to be. And this might be a very played out question, but I'll ask anyway. How do you avoid burnout? Because I feel like that's the number one culprit of when you're part of a fast team and a part of like the cutting or bleeding edge of tech, which is where you are. How do you avoid burnout?
You exercise.
That's great.
You gotta get outside. It's touch grass, So I got myself a scared ass rescue dog that needs to go outside. And I messed my knees up years ago, too much snowboarding. So I am in a daily fight with all the retired old ladies. I'm there on my app 1 minute before the classes are released, waiting. And my fast fingers are not always fast enough. Those old ladies are fast. I'm there just ready to book my class. If I get those classes, I go to those classes. It doesn't matter that just fire is burning and
Yeah.
I go put it out in the pool, or I go out in this beautiful green and go walk that poor little frightened rescue dog. So you have to step away from the desk, even though it's the hardest thing to do,
Yeah.
because you're in it and you're trying to fix it and you're trying to make it happen, but you have to just step away.
Absolutely. No, I agree. I think, we are in chairs more than ever. And now that, especially because a lot of teams are remote, and that makes it even crazier because you're not even walking to your car anymore. You're going to the bathroom and coming straight back to the chair. So exercise. No, I love that. And then of course our pets are wonderful exercise. I think I got my rescue in 2020, and it was great because I had to leave the house.
You do.
I had to walk, right? Didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Which is funny because there was one time I was really sick, and I was like, I don't want to walk this dog, and I went out to walk the dog, and I came back and I felt better immediately. Just that one, I was sick. I was still sick, but it was just like, ooh, it was nice to get out. Anyway, all right. Okay, so now the next part is, so as we're wrapping up, is I call it the FAQs, frequently asked questions. The joke is they're generally not that frequent in the sense that everyone gets different ones from time to time. So here we go. So paint me where you see the decentralized infrastructure paint me the ideal decentralized infrastructure in 10 years in your mind.
Ooh. Okay, so we have the Omanis in 10 years' time have figured out their hydrogen energy. So we have an absolute swathe of server farms sitting in Oman. We have in my mind, right, because I don't have to solve the tech for this. In my mind, we have these Bitcoin miners who they only mine when the electricity is of low enough cost for them to be able to actually run their super machines. So, and they do this at different parts of the world at different times. So they're global now, these guys. So these guys wake up to the fact that actually there's other things you can use these super machines for. So what I imagine is instead of your workload running on a machine that you take off the compute marketplace, that my DevOps are so agile, they'll be spinning up containers and managing those workloads so that as Texas goes expensive, probably as you guys wake up, instead of through the night, it was cheap. But then we assign that workload to somewhere else in the machine through the same provider. So there's a coherence that you don't even know, like you're essentially with that same machine, because the machine's such an abstraction that you've got electricity prices going up in Texas as you guys will wake up and turn in your kettles. So that goes down on the DePIN. But on the other side of the planet, we've got the partner machine that is spinning up because these Bitcoin miners, they're everywhere now, and they are worrying about electricity costs. So we have these kind of like machines that are no longer sitting idle. They've got different uses at different times of day according to different electricity costs. Maybe I should stop there because I might go even wilder.
No, that's epic. That's epic. And I hope that happens. That's pretty epic. All right, and this is a silly one, but your favorite quote unquote non-mainstream cryptocurrency coin.
Favorite non-mainstream.
Non-mainstream is a very vague term, but like
no, I mean there's only a few big ones. Well, I guess I have to say Node for now. Okay, it's not mainstream yet, so we'll get there in a few years.
I love it. What is your favorite book or the book that you gift the most?
Oh wow, probably Hotel New Hampshire. I've probably gifted that one out a few times. It's one of your American authors, John Irving. Yeah. There's something fundamentally sound about that story. Yeah.
All right. Well, that one question is just for me because I like to read. So I was like, I get a list of books. So
Okay.
this is how I do it. What is the best gift you have ever gotten?
Wow. That's tough. You know what? As somebody who does not drive now, I've given up the car. So that's another one of the ways you do exercise. If you do not own a car, you are forced to cycle and walk. But when I passed my driving test, my dad gave me a car, and the freedom that that gave me, even though I've given that up now, which is one of the hardest things I've ever done, just the freedom of that car was probably one of the biggest gifts anyone's given me.
I love it. That's awesome. And what is the best advice you ever got, or your favorite quote if you don't have?
Whoa. I do kind of love, is it Tyson? Everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
That's
Mike
that's
Tyson.
startup life for me, pretty much
Yeah.
day to day.
I love that. That's the most facts ever spoken. It's so true, both figuratively and literally. All right, and then let me see. Am I gonna do it? No. You know what? I'll leave it there. So what's next for you, for Node? And we went through a lot of things, but what's immediately
Sure.
next for NodeOps?
Yeah, I mean, for us internally, it might not. Well, it should reflect externally, but we have got to make sure that our marketing and our positioning is pure and simple for people to understand, because we are covering the whole range. Like, we are covering from retail all the way through to, we actually have enterprise clients who are asking us to spin up like our PC. So like the range that we cover is incredible. And we've done that in 18 months. So we actually now need to sit and take stock and actually make sure that people understand our position and our narrative. So it's going to be a huge job internally. Hopefully externally, it just means some simple messaging, like that it comes across as, if somebody like you pops in and looks at the ecosystem and is like, what is this about? It comes across simply.
Yeah.
But like, given that we're a startup that started in one place and has pivoted to a much broader marketplace, we have a lot of kind of rebranding efforts still to go. So that's going to be a huge internal push that we're going to be focused on.
Yeah, that's gonna be intense, but it's probably gonna be a lot of fun. And where can people learn more about you and more about NodeOps?
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn, so easy to find, and NodeOps at nodeops.network.
Awesome. All right. So as we're wrapping up, is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
Go open up a wallet if you haven't. Think about your seed phrase if you haven't. And get involved in Web3, because it's really going to be everywhere. And eventually you're not going to think about it. So it's kind of fun to be one of the early ones that had to ponder how you're going to store a seed phrase. My secret is shards. You don't put it all in one place, people.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I guess that's it. And so for everyone listening at home, be mindful of your seed phrase.